The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Open Occitanie. Sign up with the code SGPN to 50% bonus up to $1,000. Also brought to you by Edge Boost. Earn up to $750 per month on your sports gambling transactions. But edgeboost.bet, promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. A reminder that they are the leader in dad-driven picks and props. Get a set of today. Because sports.com, RATHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Game Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It is currently Sunday afternoon, roughly 1 p.m. Eastern Time on January 26th. And Rosso, Scott Reichel, once again, going solo for this pod. Time to get into the first episode post-Australian Open. So we're going to break down the upcoming event in Montpellier. So it's going to be the only ATP event on the entire slate for the next week. It's a 250. It's a pretty fun event, and either way, we're going to break it down. It's going to be, once again, what should be a pretty interesting hardcourt indoor tournament. It's my favorite, probably TV aesthetic, because you have the blue court with the, I'd say, red backdrop around it, which should be pretty fun. But either way, point is we're going to break down that event in a second. For that, though, do you want to recap what happened for the last two episodes, though? Because we do have to recap the actual final in the Australian Open on the men's side and the women's side for the lock and dog picks. Then we'll get into some takeaways and some big picture stuff. Starting off with the actual recap of the lock and dog. Starting off with the women's episode, we ended up sweeping. So overall, had a great women's final. Ended up winning the lock there with the double faults prop, actually. Had the Keys and Sabalenka over 4.5 combined double faults at minus 115. That got there. Keys got an A on the group project, didn't do anything. She had 0 double faults the entire match. Sabalenka, though, had 5. So she carried us to a nice winner there. Nice win for the lock. For the dog, nice win. As we had Keys plus 3.5 games, took an alt spread from the 4.5, got 3.5 at plus 130. As Keys not only covered, but won outright. The spread was never in doubt. Keys did win the first set comfortably, 6-3. So either way, point is she covered. Got a little bit dicey, I guess, because she did lose the second set 6-2. So in theory, if Sabalenka won the third set 6-3 onward, we would have ended up losing. The point is Keys did win the final set 7-5, en route to cashing us the lock and dog. For the men's final, unfortunately, got reverse swept, so it ended up canceling itself out. Now, we doubled down on the over. That didn't get there. In other words, we needed Zverev to win one damn set. That's all we needed, just one set, and he couldn't do it. So for the lock, we had the over 38.5 games and minus 118 on FanDuel. FanDuel went rogue. We ended up seeing a pretty interesting I'd say collection of 3 sets, which was kind of rinse and repeat, where Sinner was holding easily, Zverev was battling, but Zverev just could not get any opportunities against Sinner's serve, and eventually that came back to bite him, as Sinner did win in straight sets. And then we ended up having the dog basically being the same play. We had Sinner to win the match, and both players to win a set at plus 134. Didn't happen, as Zverev could not win a single set. So I'm going to go in order of the takeaways here, starting off with the women's final. You had Keys finally getting over the hump, winning her first ever Grand Slam title. Good for her. I feel like we were all at a point as tennis fans where we were skeptical of her ability to get over the finish line, because she had been, I'd say, the victim of a ton of very close and painful Grand Slam losses in the past, and she eventually got over the finish line as she was able to beat Sabalenka in a third set war, where it ended up turning into a 7-5. Keys got the break in the final game to win the tournament, as there were no break points in the first 11 games of the third set. So overall, nice job serving by both players, mostly Keys, who was able to win 69% of the first serve points. Sabalenka won 60% by comparison. Second serve, though, Sabalenka was a lot better. Sabalenka did win 62% of the second serve points, where you ended up seeing Keys win 48%. But either way, match was pretty even, and eventually you did see Keys outlast Sabalenka with that break on the final point of the entire match. Good for her. It's an all-time great title run, not just because of the, I'd say, overall pass and the amount of time she spent on tour without winning a Grand Slam title. She's one of the oldest players on tour to win her first ever Grand Slam title at her current age. So once again, she's up there in years, but she was still able to finally get over the finish line for her first ever title on the Grand Slam level. Now, for the actual path, I got to read off the actual opponent she's faced off against, because she beat Lee and she beat Roos. Now, Roos was an absolute war, won 7-5 in the final set of the second round. After that point, she beat Collins, who we know is still a solid player. I know people in Australia hate her, but still a solid player. Then she had a phenomenal all-time run as she beat Rybakina in 3 sets, beat Svitolina in 3 sets, beat Swiatek in 3 sets, and beat Sabalenka in 3 sets, which means that Keys ended up beating the number 1 and the number 2 players in the world in both the semis and the final of the event, which is something that doesn't happen that often. You're looking at a player who was able to beat the best of the best on the WTA tour en route to a Grand Slam title. And even Rybakina, who I know has been kind of inconsistent over the years, still has a Grand Slam title. She made the Australian Open final a couple years ago. Still a very impressive run, and I wanted to give Keys her flowers, not just because of the fact she cashed our bets with the alt spread, but the fact is she was able to finally get over the finish line when it looked like she was going to be a consistent bridesmaid. She finally became a bride. Good for her. Wanted to give her a shout out there. For the men's final, Zverev loses in the final again. Now, to go into a bit of detail here, Zverev has lost now in 3 separate Grand Slam finals. He's officially a Wimbledon final loss away from the career runner-up Grand Slam. He's lost in the final of the Australian Open. Of course, that happened on Sunday morning. Happened in the French Open last year to Alcaraz. Lost in the U.S. Open final to Thiem in the COVID year. So the point is, he's only missing a Wimbledon final loss to fully, I'd say, wrap up the career runner-up Grand Slam. Zverev, though, wasn't even really competitive in that entire match, to be honest, and that was what hurt us for the lock and dog. I don't have any regrets there. We had a chance in the tiebreak in the second set, and unfortunately for us, Zverev just could not get the job done. He had a mini break in the second set, then immediately punted back-to-back unforced errors on the forehand side. Then he ended up having the really painful net cord at the 4-4 spot, which set up Sinner the opportunity to serve out for the first set. So you saw Sinner and Zverev have a pretty generic baseline rally, and Sinner hit the net, bounced over barely for a winner, and at that point, the set was over, as far as I'm concerned. You saw Zverev threaten a bit in the 30-30 spot in the 5-6 return game, actually, but Sinner put away a point at the net, and then ended up having a nice overall final point to force a breaker. Point is, though, Zverev really just could not threaten at all in the Sinner return game. Sinner faced 0 break points in the entire damn match. It's one thing to lose in a Grand Slam final. 0 break point chances. Are you serious? Sinner was coasting for threat basically the entire match of his service games, and I believe it's the 3rd time in, I'd say, the turn of the millennium, where a player won a Grand Slam final without facing a break point. I know one of them was Federer against Philippoussis. I think the other was Nadal against, I want to say, Anderson, I think. Point is, though, it doesn't happen that often, and Zverev is viewed as being a good returner on tour, and he had 0 break points. So it was really just a sign of Zverev being extremely conservative, extremely passive, especially on the forehand side, and Sinner felt like he was pretty comfortable serving the entire match. But Sinner had a grand total of 6 aces compared to 12 for Zverev, but he ended up winning 84% of the first serve points, won 63% of the second serve points, compared to 69% first serve for Zverev and 50% second serve. It just seemed like Zverev was really just a non-threat in all of these return games, and he was, because Sinner did not face a single break point. In fact, I am wondering how many deuces Sinner actually faced in the entire match on his serve. I want to say 1. Like, there really were not many deep, I'd say, return games for Zverev. And with the exception of the 2-2 service game in the first set, where Sinner had 2 deuces and ended up getting 2 advantages, no break points for Zverev, I don't think he faced another deuce in the entire match on his serve. Sorry, no, he did in the third set. He had a third set 40-15, blew it, then he ended up having 2 advantages. So besides 2 return games for Zverev, there were 0 deuces on Sinner service games, and there were 0 break points. So really just an abysmal return game, a return match for Zverev, and that's why he ended up losing. But overall, a pretty common theme for Zverev in his career. He's able to get close to the finish line, doesn't actually win, and he gets very passive on big points. We saw this in the Djokovic semifinal match before the retirement. We saw it in the quarterfinal match against Paul, where Paul self-destructed. He probably should have been down 2-0. Arguably should have lost in straight sets. But Zverev against Sinner, you just can't be that passive. And Zverev was really, once again, just hitting the ball back with the forehand. He wasn't trying to take control of points. He was just hitting the ball back in play, center of the court, letting Sinner dictate. And you can't let Sinner do that because he's too powerful on the forehand side, and he's too consistent. So either way, Zverev ended up losing in straight sets as he killed our lock and dog single-handedly. Now, for the Sinner takeaway, he is already, in my opinion, one of the best hardcourt players I've ever seen. Now, I know that you're looking at the big three, probably not as much Nadal. I know Nadal had some U.S. Open runs, and he won the Australian Open a couple times, but the point is you are looking at Nadal, who got buried by Djokovic for about 10 straight years on hard court. It's mostly, for me, Federer and Djokovic, who I think are top tier hard court players all time. Then you look at Sinner, and Sinner's won 3 straight hard court Grand Slams. Won the Australian Open last year, won the U.S. Open last year, and now he won the Australian Open again in 2025. So Sinner's overall, I'd say, talents and his overall skill set make him virtually unbeatable on hard court. Because Sinner has just been so well-rounded on the surface. The serve was an issue over the years. That got better. That got drastically better. So that was his main flaw. He fixed it. The forehand's great. Best forehand on tour. You're looking at the backhand, which has been very solid as well. The court coverage is great. The net coverage is pretty solid. He really has no flaws on hard court, and it's why he's able to get by a bunch of, I'd say, quality opposition relatively easily. And it feels like nobody besides Alcaraz on hard court, who ended up beating him in the last hard court loss he had months ago, is even a threat on hard court for Sinner. So Sinner, great job by him. He was able to beat Shelton in a competitive straight sets, beat Zverev in straight sets as well. After dropping some sets earlier on to Rune with the pneumonia, and of course the random set drop to Schoolcat earlier in the event, he hit his groove against top-tier competition. And Sinner is kind of ruthless against top-tier competition, as he's proven time and time again. He will be able to get over the finish line against elite competition on hard court. He did it again on a Sunday. So props to Sinner, who I think is the best player in the world. I know you could argue Alcaraz, but I think Sinner I'd put above Alcaraz right now. We'll see what happens in the French Open, or even the upcoming potential suspension he might be getting with the, of course, the failed drug test case, which should get reopened. So we'll see what happens there. Point is, though, Sinner did end up winning his 3rd Grand Slam title, and they were all on hard court, and we'll see if he can potentially win a clay or a grass Grand Slam throughout the rest of 2025. But either way, for Zverev, one last point. We did see from Keys, though, that eventually, after never being able to get over the finish line, she had one golden run where it worked all in her favor, where she ended up winning. Maybe Zverev can find the same path in the future, but right now, Zverev's legacy, I'd say for the actual career that he has, or the career arc, he's on pace to be the best player of all time to never win a Grand Slam. Right now, that is Zverev's legacy, and that it will be his legacy until he finally wins one. So we'll see what happens, but nice win for Sinner as he won straight sets. Anyway, time to move on to Montpellier, the final ATP, I should say the next ATP event, which is the only one throughout the course of the entire week. For that, though, do you want to remind once again that we are brought to you by a great SGPN promo right now. The honor of the big game from now until February 9th, 15% of everything on the merch store with the promo code of Big Game, actually. So once again, in honor of the big game from now until February 9th. If you want to get something on the merch store with a discount, use the promo code Big Game for a 15% off discount on everything on the SGPN merch store. Plus, a reminder, if you do want to show some support for the podcast, reminder you could also leave a rating and a review on Spotify or Apple. You could also, once again, like, subscribe on YouTube. A reminder, every pick is free. And I forgot to mention, by the way, we did win the outright for Sinner on the Australian Open. So that was another outright we can add to our collection. It was plus 125. I know that it's not a lot of plus money, but it still counts. So either that counts. Point is, though, if you want to show support for the podcast, please leave a rating and a review on Spotify or Apple. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you've not done so already. Plus, a reminder, we have a lot of great merchandise in the SGPN merch store. We have a bunch of different shirts. We have sweatshirts, mugs, all for the Tennis Gambling Podcast. So once again, if you want to check that out, don't forget to check out the website. Not just for this podcast, for the other podcasts of the network. They pretty much all have merchandise. The NBA Gambling Podcast, the MLB Gambling Podcast, a WNBA Gambling Podcast as well. All shows that I'm on. They all have merchandise as well. If you want to check that out, you can. A reminder, when you use the promo code BIGGAME at checkout, you get 50% off everything for the next couple of weeks. Anyway, time to briefly mention the sponsors for the actual podcast are brought to you by EdgeBoost, a new sponsor. SGPN has partnered up with EdgeBoost, the premier Visa debit card for bettors. EdgeBoost card allows you the ability to avoid the hassle of having your card denied at the sportsbook, DFS site, sweepstakes site, racetrack, and casino. A reminder, you could also earn up to $750 per month in cashback rewards for using the EdgeBoost card. Best part is no credit cards, and it's completely free. Sign up today and use the promo code SGPN so you get better cashback rewards and instant tier 2 status. That's EdgeBoost.bet. promo code SGPN, edgeboost.bet, promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by MyBookie. MyBookie's been around with SGPN for a long time, and a reminder that it's the place to bet every sport, plus props for every game, and their live dealer casino. MyBookie accepts customers from a ton of locations, easy deposit, and lightning fast payouts with crypto. You can also, once again, head to mybookie.ag, promo code SGPN, for a 100% deposit match up to $1,000, plus a $10 casino chip. That's mybookie.ag, promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Just finished recapping the Australian Open Finals with Sinner and Keys winning. Now it's time to get into the main purpose of the show, getting into the outrights for Montpellier. Now, since qualifying is still going on, I do have to admit we have no quarter odds, so apologies there. The final rounds of qualifying are taking place on Monday, so you might get some quarter odds eventually, but we decided to get the show out early, so instead we're going to jump right into the outrights for the actual event title. So getting into the actual title outrights for the event. Starting off with the odds. We'll do the odds first, then we'll get into the actual draw and our picks. So Rublev is the favorite at plus 350. Once again, shop right, you can find better odds. Felix is plus 450. Kaboli 750. Greek Sports 10-1. Bublik, defending champion, is 10-1. You have Eubanks at 20-1. You have George 20-1. You have Rinderknech at 20-1. Kaza 20-1. Hallis 22-1. Dzanchov 22-1. Boo is 25-1. If you want to jump around, you can get Wawrinka at 40-1. You can get Goffin at 28-1. Gasquet 50-1. You kind of get the point. Now, I'll get into the draw in a second. Forgot to mention, though, the previous winners of the event, which is something we always mention. So last year, we did actually win the outright in this event with Bublik at 6-1. I went back and confirmed it was 6-1. Bublik beat George in the final. Sinner beat Cressy. Bublik beat Zverev, so two-time champion here for Bublik. Goffin ended up beating Bautista Agut. Now, the main theme you can have here for the last two overall iterations of the event, a good serve goes a long way. Because George has a pretty good serve in general. Bublik has definitely an above-average serve on tour. Cressy made a final. So you know that good serves go a long way. Sinner, we know, is a good server. You're looking at Goffin as being the exception. But for the most part, for the last couple of years, you have seen a good serve result in a title for the last three winners. So we'll see if that carries over again here in 2025. Now, for the actual outrights, once again, looking at the favorites here, Bublik is a pretty good price at 12-1. I'll mention that again in a second. But for the actual favorites here, Rublev is the favorite. And the question is, should he be at around plus 350, because he's been really bad so far in 2025. In fact, he's been pretty bad for the last couple months of 2024 as well. Now, I do have to point out, I think the path is very favorable for Rublev, and to go through the actual draw here, he has a bye in the first round, then Eubanks or a qualifier, should be favored in that one, then either Rinderknech, Mayotte, Kukushkin, or a qualifier. So Rublev really should have basically a bye into the semis as far as I'm concerned. Maybe Eubanks, if the serve is on, can upset him, but I don't think Eubanks is that good. So Rublev, even though he's been in bad form, not a great draw, though, in the Australian Open, facing off against Fonseca in the first round, which is very, very tough. But still, point is, I think Rublev is worthy of being the favorite. I understand that he is a guy who has a lot of upside based on his overall potential. Mentally, though, he self-destructs all the damn time, and that's why it's dangerous to take at plus 350. But when your best opponent right now in the quarter is arguably Rinderknech, I kind of have to take you. Your draw is that weak. Now, the second quarter has Bublik with a bye. He's in the same quarter as Goffin. Goffin's been a mess for months. You have Barreri, you have Kempfer, you have Bellucci, and Puig. So Bublik also has a pretty favorable draw. Now, the quarter could be interesting, just at the qualifier, because you have to worry about maybe Krenya Busta, maybe the likes of, if you want to throw in Basilashvili. But there's another round of qualifying, so I can't really try to predict who's going to make it out of qualifying and then worry about who's going to get which spot. So I kind of have to ignore the qualifiers right now. Busta, though, could be interesting, but I don't know if he's going to even make the field, so I can't give him out. So point is, for the second quarter, really weak in general. Bublik, I know, has been a mess lately, and we saw him lose very early on in the Australian Open. He's been punting matches, and we did fade him in the match against... I'm trying to remember who he faced off against, and I'm drawing a blank. Who the hell did he face off against? We faded him in the first set, I'd say a couple of weeks ago, and he ended up losing the first set. But either way, point is, Bublik has not been great lately, but I do think his draw is favorable. And the point is, going back to Rublev, if the main opponent you're going to have in the first couple of rounds is Bublik to make it into the final. I think I got to take Rublev. I think 350 is a great price for a guy who's very good on hard court typically, good on indoor hard court, pretty good serve as well. And there's really not anybody worth a damn in the top half of the bracket, so I am going to go with Rublev as my first choice. I see M jumping in, telling me that he found the podcast from the Australian Open stuff and that he made some money. Appreciate it. Hopefully you enjoy the new computer. Happy to help out. Hopefully you do enjoy the show. And thank you for sticking around after the Australian Open for the random 250 events that we end up covering on the show. Either way, though, for the first outright, I am going to go with Rublev at plus 350. I kind of have to. I just laid out the actual draw. It's a really weak top half of the draw. And that was kind of my main takeaway for the actual field. I wanted to make some cases for some long shots. You know that I love to give out a 20-1, a 25-1. We had a Nishioka outright last year. Hit a couple of random long shots. Monfils earlier this year, we picked him to win a title. He did. That was like 16-1. This field is very, very weak. And I feel like it's going to be a pretty top-heavy event because I don't see many guys that I want to pick as long shot candidates to make a deep run. And Rublev at 350, yes, I understand that he lost in straight sets to Fonseca. Fonseca's also been in really good form. But still, I think Rublev at 350 is a good price for that draw. I'll risk it for the biscuit. Give me Rublev plus 350 as my first choice for the outright. Now, for the next pick I'm going to have, I am going to go with the bottom half of the draw. Now, this one is a bit difficult. I'll admit that I think Felix has the most difficult quarter out of everybody besides maybe Caboli. I'll get into that in a second. But I think that the top half of the draw is significantly weaker than the bottom half of the draw. So for this one, Felix, we know, did win a title right before the Australian Open. Then we saw him enter the Australian Open, and he looked okay for the most part. Did not make an insanely deep run, but I thought he looked fine. I didn't think he looked awful by any means, and he eventually did lose in the Australian Open to the likes of Fokina in the second round in 5. Won the first 2 sets, then eventually did lose in 5, but he did have a deep run in Adelaide for a title. Then he had a 4-setter against Struff. I wonder how much fatigue played a factor. Point is, though, he did win a title, beating the likes of Korda, beating Paul, beating Guillaume, beating Kaza, beat some good competition in Adelaide. Also ended up beating Fritz in the United Cup as well right before it. So I think that Felix is in pretty good form in general. Now, his overall quarter is somewhat difficult. Kaza, with the home crowd advantage, would be a potential second-round matchup. If Kaza gets by Wawrinka, they might kill each other. So that's a pretty good spot for Felix to capitalize on the scraps. You have Bu, who's been really bad. Altmaier, who's not a hardcore player at all. Coric, who's been awful. But he did make the final last year and a qualifier. So if you end up getting like Busta in that qualifier spot, you maybe might see Coric get upset early on. But the point is, I think that besides the Kaza matchup in the second round, where Felix did beat him a couple weeks ago in 3 sets, I'm not really scared by the other guys. Bu's been really bad for the last couple weeks. Coric has been awful. So I think I'm going to go with Felix here for my second pick at 440. Yes, I know I'm taking all the head cases with Rublev and Felix as my first 2 outright picks. But once again, it's a very weak field in a 250. I think both guys, talent-wise, should be the class of the field. And I do think that Felix, after beating Kaza in the head-to-head meeting a couple weeks ago, should have the edge there. I think that it's a good spot for him, and I think that it's a good opportunity for Felix to kind of get some revenge tour vibes in this event, because he ended up making it to the semis last year, did lose to Bublik in the 3rd set of that one, and then he ended up losing, of course, the event. So I think Felix has some unfinished business here, where he was able to get an opportunity to make it into the final and to win a title here last year. Didn't do so as Bublik got the job done. I believe Bublik became the first ATP player ever to win a title while dropping the first set in every match. Now, I know Muller did the same thing a couple weeks ago in 2025, but I believe that Bublik was the first guy to ever do that, and in the path was Felix in the semifinal. So Felix had a chance to actually win the title, didn't do so as he lost to Bublik there. I think it's a good spot for him at 440. I'll go with him as my second choice. Going back, though, to the relative chalk that I ended up having for the event, I am going to go a little bit, I'd say, longer of a shot. I'm going to skip over Caboli at 750. Caboli's been battling some injuries, and he really has not been in great form. So I do kind of question how sharp he's going to be. Did lose in the first round of the Australian Open as he lost to Echeverry in the first matchup. Very difficult draw, I'll admit it, but in the United Cup ended up beating Stricker, beat Humbert, so good win there. Then lost to Makic 6-1, 6-2. had a retirement against Nardi, so I was questioning his overall fitness. Then he ended up losing in 4 to Echeverry. So he should be fine physically, but I still question if that's going to hold up for the entire event. And Caboli, I think, is a solid player. He has no career titles, though, on the ATP Tour. Did lose in the 500 final to Korda last year. I think his draw is okay. The matchup, though, against Griekspoor or potentially De Zandschulp in the quarters could be tricky. Maybe De Jong or Halles can kind of be a sneaky candidate there for an upset. Halles does have the home crowd advantage if they would face off in the second round. Caboli, though, at 750, with no career titles, I thought that was way too cheap. And I do like Caboli a lot, don't get me wrong. But 750, I thought, was a very cheap price. Too cheap. I'm going to have to pass. Same thing with Griekspoor. I think Griekspoor is a solid player. He's won a couple of 250s before. I would have taken him, but his form has not been great lately. Griekspoor lost very early on in the Australian Open. Not an easy draw, I'll admit, as he faced off against the likes of Hurkacz, and he ended up losing in the first round in straight sets. Point is, though, Davis Cup lost to Sinner in straight sets, beat Struff, lost to Alcaraz in straight sets, but he really has not played much tennis. He had a couple of doubles wins in the Australian Open, eventually before losing in the third round, but he's only played one singles match in the last month and change. That Sinner-Davis Cup matchup was in late November. So he's played one singles match basically since December of 2024. I question the overall, I'd say, match fitness, and I do question if this is going to result in an upset early on to De Zandschulp in the first round. 2-2 in the head-to-head. So it could be interesting there. Did not like the draw, though, for Griekspoor, potentially facing off against I'd say an upset candidate there in De Zandschulp, then maybe facing off against Caboli in the same quarter. Not a fan of that. Instead, I'll let Griekspoor and Caboli kill each other. I'll go with Felix in the bottom half of the draw, which hopefully opens up in his favor. However, I am going to go with the other head case. I'm going with the head case hat trick here for this tournament. Give me Bublik at 12-1. Now, Bublik, once again, has been really bad. However, he's a two-time champion, and his draw is very favorable. Mentioned before, the top half of the draw is much weaker than the bottom half of the draw. Now, in the last couple of events, he has not even really shown up. I ended up losing to Cerundolo in the first round of the Australian Open, lost to Kecmanovic in the first round of Adelaide. We ended up betting on Kecmanovic to win the first set in that match, and we ended up winning. That was a straight set win for Kecmanovic. Faced off against Rune in Paris, lost in straight sets. That was the last time he actually won. Last tournament he was in, they actually won a match in. Beat Fognini in the first round of Paris in October of 2024. So yes, Bublik has been getting his ass kicked lately. I'm aware of it. However, Bublik, we know, is the kind of guy that can flip a switch from being really bad to winning a title at really just a moment's notice. And I think that with him winning the title last year and with him being a two-time champion, there might be a bit of pride here. He did lose early on in the last couple of events he was in. Maybe this is the event he kind of turns it around, or at least shows some overall heart to want to be here. But the path is favorable. A bye in the first round. You have Kempfer or Barreri. Like, that's a pretty reasonable second-round matchup. Then maybe Goffin or Puig in the third round. Like, I think that's a very favorable draw. And 12-1 for a two-time champion, I just think is too good of a price to pass up on. So I'll go with Bublik at 12-1. Am I going to be happy about it when he punts a match early? No. But 12-1, I think, is a good price for a guy that once again is defending champion. I got this a two-time champion here, a guy with one of the best serves in the entire field. And I mentioned before that good serves go a long way. I think Bublik has proven time and time again, even when he goes down a set in this event, he will not quit. He won every match last year after dropping the first set, and that resulted in a title here. So give me 12-1 for the price here. I'll put it this way. I think that Griekspoor should have higher odds than Bublik, with that draw especially in that quarter. So based on the overall pricing, I think Bublik should be closer, in my opinion, to 10-1, 9-1, but 12-1 is a good price. I'll take that as my last pick for the outright. So once again, I'm going with 3 head cases to win the event. What can possibly go wrong? Give me Rublev at 350, give me Felix at 440, and give me Bublik at 12-1. If you wanted to go for a potential long shot, if I had to pick one, you know what? I'll go with Luca Puig at like 25-1, but I'm not going to actually give that out. I don't think Puig's good enough to beat some of the top tier talent, but either way, that'll be my 3 outright picks for the event. I see another comment, by the way, in the comment section. I see Manzi jumping by, saying that I did well in the Australian Open. Looking forward to the new week. Unfortunately, ended the Australian Open on a sour note with the reverse sweep in the men's final. blame it on Zverev. We needed one set from the number 2 player in the world, and he couldn't win a set. So I have no regrets on that one. Point is, though, we had a good tournament overall on the men's and women's side, and hopefully we keep that rolling here in this week for Montpellier. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for the actual outrights for Montpellier. Apologies once again. We have no quarter odds. It is what it is. Now it's time to get into the actual lock and dog picks. For that, though, I want to remind you once again, we are brought to you by Open Fantasy because they have a lot of great items in their pick menu. They have a lot of ways to make money easily, as well with Profit Boost and Gimme Pick'ems. They have the NFL, college football, college basketball, college, really anything you can think of. They have MMA, NBA, NASCAR, and more, tennis included. You can also use specials and boost on our flex entries. And a reminder, for the upcoming entry, you know what? I'll go with Mac Hollins higher on his longest reception for this game against the Chiefs. Should be around 9.5. I like the higher on that one. He's gone over this in 9 of the last 11 games. Think that it's a good spot. Went over this number twice in the same game, actually, against the Chiefs in the regular season. Think that it's a pretty low number for a guy that should get at least one catch, and for a big body receiver that can be involved in some jump ball scenarios. Give me Matt Collins, long reception, higher, 9.5 yards in that game for my entry. Reminder, though, when you do sign up for your new account, use the promo code SGPN to claim special pick and first-time deposit offer up to 1K bonus cash. So once again, special pick and first-time deposit offer up to 1K. What a great deal. On our fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. If you want to try experimenting with betting models, then Rhythm's the place for you because Rhythm can help you build models in seconds. You could also build a model in a couple different ways. You could build your own one from scratch. You can copy one from the leaderboard or let Rhythm build one for you in seconds. A reminder, though, that when you do sign up for your new account, you could also get a nice overall week free trial. And a reminder, you could also get NFL picks, NFL props, college basketball, and NBA. Rhythm has it all. So if you do want some bonus player props, Rhythm will give you some data-supported player props for the upcoming games. Reminder, though, for your free week trial, go to the link, sportscam.com Rhythm, sportscam.com, RITHMM. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Just finished previewing the outrights here for Montpellier. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. Now, for the lock, I believe these matches are taking place on Tuesday, I believe. So you have some time to actually get your bets in. Price might move, though. For the lock, I am going to go to the matchup between, you know what, we'll go with Puy against the likes of Bellucci. For this one, we're going to go with Puy on the money line at minus 140. If you want to take the minus 1.5 games, minus 118 or so, don't need that either, but I'll play it safe and I'll go with the money line. So Puy in general is fine. We know he used to be a top 30 guy in the world years ago, had a bunch of injuries, beat Nadal once in the U.S. Open, fun fact. Point is, though, Puy has been healthy recently, and he's been fine. Now, so far this year, not the greatest results. He's 1-2 in 2025. However, he beat the opponents he's supposed to beat, and he lost to the likes of Basaveretti and Zverev. So I'm not going to roast him too hard for being 1-2 in 2025. He faced off against Basaveretti in Brisbane. He's a solid player. We know Basaveretti's been able to make some deep runs. He ended up taking a set of Djokovic in the Australian Open in the first round. So no shame there, losing that one. And then his reward was facing off against Zverev in the first round of the Australian Open, who, of course, made the final of the entire event. So Puy losing 3 separate sets, 6-4 to Zverev, I really can't roast. It's not even that bad. Zverev made the final, though, and that was his first-round matchup. So Puy's record recently has not been that great. Very good competition, though, and this is a step down in competition as far as I'm concerned. Now, Bellucci's been really bad against bad competition for the last couple weeks. Bellucci's lost 5 of his last 6. He lost in the second round of qualifying in the Australian Open, so he didn't even make it that far. I believe he lost to Ottman in qualifying, and you could argue that in that 6-match stretch, his best opponent was Ottman. So he hasn't faced off against anybody worth a damn. And I feel like that's the main difference between these two guys. Both guys not necessarily in good form in terms of wins and losses. But Puy had Basaveretti and Zverev, where Bellucci had the likes of Ottman and a couple of relative unknowns. So Bellucci's really going through it right now. He's struggling against bad competition. I think that Puy is the better player in this field, in this overall matchup. And Puy's also French. So if you want to go for the home crowd advantage, we know how rowdy the French crowd can get, especially here in this event. The crowd gets wild over in Montpellier. I think it's going to work to Puy's benefit. I think that Puy is a better player right now than Bellucci. Bellucci's trying to make the jump from challenger to ATP level. He had a decent moment last year for maybe an overall tournament or two, but nothing, I'd say, substantial or sustainable. And I think you're looking at a spot where Bellucci's kind of regressing back to that challenger level player that he is. I think that Puy, though, is the better player, and with him playing in his backyard in France, I like the price here. Give me Puy money line at -140 as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go with the matchup between two French guys, two veterans. We are going with the old age home matchup here. Going to go with Gasquet taking on Mannarino. For this one, we're going to go with the over 2.5 sets at +135. Now, Gasquet has been really bad lately. He's on the verge of retirement, and you're looking at him losing a set in 8 of his last 10 matches. Now, Mannarino has not been much better. Mannarino's lost at least 1 set in 8 of his last 9 matches. So both guys have been dropping sets left and right. Both guys are up there in years, not much firepower, and you're looking at what should be a very, very competitive matchup featuring a bunch of breaks and a bunch of long rallies. I think it's going to be a very, I'd say, competitive match between two guys that are kind of up there in years and two guys that are really focused on getting back on track. But you're looking at each of Mannarino's last 3 matches as well, not ending in straight sets. He's lost in a couple marathons. He lost a match to McDonald a couple weeks ago in 3. I think you're looking at a pretty simple matchup between two guys that play pretty similar styles in terms of rallying. A lot of overall long rallies expected for this matchup. Two guys that are not great at serving either, and once again, you're looking at both guys being in bad form. Gasquet dropping at least 1 set in 8 of 10, Mannarino dropping at least 1 set in 8 of 9, and once again, each of the last 3 matches for Mannarino did not end in straight sets. +135, I think, is a great price. I understand the argument is that, once again, these guys can be very, very inconsistent, so much so that they can easily get buried by anybody in straight sets. Maybe so, but I'm hoping for this sake that 2 negatives make a positive, and you see 2 guys in bad form find a way to kind of balance out for what should be a competitive matchup. But I think you're going to see a pretty competitive war here in France. 2 guys which the crowd should love because they've been very successful, at least for French tennis standards over the last decade or so. Give me a fun crowd atmosphere, a nice old-timers day, I guess, at the venue. Give me the over 2.5 sets as my dog here at +135. I see a question from Gavin asking if I was shocked that Sabalenka lost outright. I mean, I did the episode for the women's final, and I did give out Keys +3.5 games. So I took an alt spread on Keys to cover at +130 that got there as my dog. Was I shocked that Sabalenka lost? Yes, I was. At the end of the day, you kind of have to take a see it. At the end of the day, you kind of need the see and then I'll believe it approach, where Keys just kept losing all the time in Grand Slams. And you knew the talent was there, but you figured at some point it was going to work in her benefit and never did. I gave up hope, to be honest. I just did. I thought Keys would never win one. I was shocked that Sabalenka lost. However, I was not shocked that Keys made it a marathon because I did pick over 2.5 sets. I picked Keys plus the games. I picked an absolute war. I thought Sabalenka would win in 3. That was my initial prediction. So I wasn't as shocked as other people, but I was still shocked Keys got it done as a whole. So to answer your question, yes, but not as much as other people. And Tucker, give me a shout out there for the Keys, a call there for the games. So point is, Gavin, to answer your question, I was slightly shocked, not as shocked as other people. That's kind of my thoughts there for that matchup. But anyway, to get back into the recap of my lock and dog picks for the upcoming matches here in Montpellier. The lock is going to be on Puy on the money line against Bellucci at -140. For the dog, I am going to go with Gasquet and Mannarino over 2.5 sets of +135. That was available on Caesars for that price. Until next time, I'll be back once again for the quarterfinals of Montpellier. Until next time, find me on Twitter, Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show. Find me on the MLB show. Find me on the W show. And find me on a bunch of the shows on the network. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.